It's your link, so you have to. Oh,
yes, I have indeed hit the magic button. So here we are with the magicians, Jonathan Fink and David Debato, on our daily episode that we call the Dictators. And there's certainly enough dictators and wannabe dictators to go around, Jonathan, right now. We're going to discuss.
It's a revolving door, isn't it? One in, one out, which we're going to be discussing.
Revolving door. So we're going to discuss another country that may descend into dictatorship or authoritarianism. Anyway, welcome to the Dictators. We're live, obviously, with my friend and partner and co-creator, co-host, Jonathan Fink, and myself, David Debato. I am also the host of the YouTube channel, which is called, if I can get it on here, sometimes it doesn't want, I always get that confused with this. Hold on, maybe I can't put it up there. Anyway,
you haven't forgotten the name.
I'll put it up on the far right here. It's the No Delusion Zone, and it's on YouTube. So please go there. No Delusion Zone. That's on YouTube, and then you can see also on top of that, protectingtherepublic.com. That's my Substack, protectingtherepublic.com, and I'm one of the tens of millions trying to protect the American Republic against the forces of evil, which or MAGA, because after all, Jonathan, what the blank is going on right now, especially
we're going to start America with this topic because this is quite something.
Let's do this. This is one of your favorites and mine as
it's one of my favorites. I'm a cheeky atheist, so I have fun with
I posted this yesterday, and so I think I got rid of the picture here, but in any event, why don't we talk about it? Yesterday, or day
so I remember.
Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, which is, of course, lie social, a GIF, an AI-generated monstrosity of him as Jesus Christ, wearing all the robes with the light of God coming out of his hand, the other hand laying on the chest of a dying man who you said has a striking resemblance to Jeffrey Epstein.
It's either Jeffrey Epstein or Jon Stewart. I think there was a he looks a little bit like Jon Stewart as well. Either way, but Trump's not going to be healing Jon Stewart.
It was disgusting to have anybody, especially a sitting American president, try to portray himself as the living embodiment of Jesus Christ is absolutely loathsome. I'll let you take it from there, Jonathan.
Well, there was a picture produced by a sort of one of these avant-garde British artists back in the 1990s, I think, and it was called Piss Christ, and it was ostensibly an image of people pissing on a crucifix.
Yeah,
I have to ask the question: is Trump Christ any less offensive, or actually, given that he is reliably accused, it seems, of at least abusing women, and there are other accusations there that are as yet unproven of potentially abusing minors, it puts an image like this into a whole other frame, I would say, of being extremely revolting.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you consider the fact that his core, his base, his strongest supporters in the United States of America are Orthodox Christians, the evangelicals and the most devout Christians in this country form up his base to portray himself as Jesus Christ. And I know you were going to mention it, going to war with the Pope, saying all kinds of nasty things about the Pope. And just horrible things. I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's the efforts, it's the sayings, it's the actions of an insane man to purposely, alienate your own base when you're in trouble anyway is obviously the sign of a lunatic. What do you think?
It's certainly someone whose sense of reality perhaps is increasingly diverging from the reality of everybody else. And I think there's some commonality here between this and between what he's doing in the Arabian Gulf, in the Hormuz Straits. That is that he seems to live actually in quite a two-dimensional narcissistic fashion, where actually the outside world doesn't really exist. Now, this is an argument that Vlad Vexler has been making recently, and it's becoming more and more compelling. We look at the world as if there is cause and effect, there is consequence. Therefore, geopolitics, the projection of power, has some relation to real limits and real actions and real capabilities in the real world. He does not seem to operate on that train. For him, words seem to be a way to manipulate reality. That reality comes to resemble the words that he's spouted and his narcissistic, intention to dominate, abuse, and control. When those words don't have an effect, he roots around to try and find other words, but it's entirely disjointed from reality. During the election period, his first election and his second, he seemed to be able to connect with his audiences by finding the right permutations of words, the right volume and tone of threat that resonated with enough people to get him elected. He seems to be able to find the right words to keep his inner cabinet, cowed and fearful. I'm guessing, but the way he projects words and manipulates words is not only completely at variance, I think, with reality. That's always been the case, and it hasn't cared one bit. But they're now becoming increasingly disjointed from his own supporters. The podcast sphere, he's losing them. So I think he's losing. I mean, this is kind of perverse empathy. I won't say he's an empathetic individual, quite the reverse. But as a kind of pathological narcissist, he does know how to manipulate people with words and emotions, and you have to have some kind of dark empathy to be able to do that. But unlike normal empathy, where you try to understand people's emotions so that you can sympathize, so that you can perhaps do something to improve their lives, this is a kind of dark empathy he has, which is entirely based on the idea that if you understand how to pull people's strings, you can control them in some way, and you can warp the world around your narcissism and ego. But it seems that empathy is starting to fail him. So what we're getting is the genocidal threat against the whole of Iran, which we now realize, and many people I think realized at the time, even then had no real basis. But he's reaching for words, trying to create an effect in the real world, and he's feeling that those words are falling flat. Those words are not having an effect anymore. So he's having to escalate. He's having to try new things, and they're getting increasingly deranged. These images, I think, are just a manifestation of that. He's reaching for ever more shocking things, ever bigger lies to try to affect the outside world. But those levers are disconnected to the machine. They are no longer responding, and he knows it. He must know it because he has this dark empathy, constantly testing the impact of his words on people. He knows it's all falling apart.
Well, you mentioned falling off the train before, and it just immediately made me think that he's riding on the same crazy train as Ozzy Osbourne. I mean, the man is always
drag Ozzy into this. Ozzy's
I mean, I'm sorry, it's one of my favorite songs, and what can I tell you? Look, Donald Trump has always been a narcissist. He's never had empathy, real empathy. I'm talking about consideration for other people's feelings at all. Never has. That's the one of the main traits of a chronic narcissist. He doesn't give a damn about anybody but himself, not even his family, himself, period. So he really doesn't care. The only thing that's changed about him is he has or is losing his faculties, his cognitive ability, whether it's dementia, senility, Alzheimer's, or a combination of both, just his age. He is losing it, but let's not make a mistake here. Let's keep one thing clear. He's always been evil. He's always had this maniacal view of the world as him being the best and biggest and brightest, when in fact he's a loathsome, illiterate criminal. So nothing's changed there. It's just that he's lost his mental faculties. And yes, this is playing out not just with Iran. This is the latest iteration of his insanity, and the fact that we've got an insane, evil person in charge of our country, in charge of the most powerful military on earth still, and many, many weapons of destruction, nuclear weapons He's the guy. He carries around what they call the football, the nuclear football, at least his aide does. And he can order that to be launched at any time. We've done programs on this. Will the American military actually follow out his illegal orders up to and including starting an atomic war? Boy, Jonathan, I hope not. But, even though I've talked to a lot of generals and admirals, including our mutual friend, Ben Hodges, I am not sure that he will not find some senior American officer, a flag level officer, that means admiral or general level, that will in fact implement his illegal, even genocidal orders. That's what it's come to now. As you know, Hegseth has purged dozens and dozens of officers, senior officers. We're talking generals and admirals. And what else did he do that is extremely important, significant? He purged dozens, maybe more than 100 judge advocate generals. Those are the military attorneys. Why would you purge so many military attorneys? In my opinion, to do something that's illegal, that normal attorneys, military attorneys, would advise him not to do, that it violates the Constitution, it violates international law. It's a violation of genocide, of humanitarian law, that it's just flat out wrong. It violates the American morality, what our armed forces are all about. He got rid of them. He got rid of the lawyers. He got rid of the generals and the admirals, anyone who would push back on him. We're in very, very, very dangerous times, Jonathan.
And, he's not pushing them back because he thinks they're going to stop him. I think he believes nothing can stop him. I expect what he wants is to make sure that their advice isn't on the record, so that it cannot be quoted at any time to say, well, we told you and you were given this advice. He wants to have that recourse, which he always does, is nobody told me. I did this thing and I thought it was right and nobody told me, which he's done on several occasions.
He loves to say that. Some people say, I don't know who those people are. There's never any people. That's in his head. The man is delusional. The man is delusional, Jonathan. That's, by the way, why I called my channel the No Delusion Zone. People ask me about that.
I think he always has been. I think he always has been. I mean, certainly he's had cognitive decline, but those same patterns of speech are apparent in recordings from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. He may appear superficially more fluent. He may appear superficially to have, a faster speech and a larger vocabulary, but when you break down the structure of what he's saying, the ideas are no more sophisticated than they are now. The ideas are no more based in fact or reading or historical understanding or reality then than they are now. But of course, he's always had the cushion of privilege. What he's also had, and I'm going to throw this back to you, I don't take this the wrong way, but Trump was made in America in that his privilege was granted him by a system. His privilege was granted him by certain classes of people and certain individuals, especially in the media, who then connived to build and create this persona, which has been very useful to him, the persona in The Apprentice, that was amplified through the media system. And as he's got on this journey of increasing illegality, of screwing suppliers over, of monstrous behavior, two things haven't happened. And this is why he's made in America and cannot be seen, unfortunately, as something for which Americans can't take responsibility. Those two things is he was never ostracized socially. He was never ostracized by his sort of political class, by his social class, for his monstrous behavior. And secondly, he was never held to account through the legal system. Those are two extraordinary failings which talk, to my mind, to something really very badly wrong systemically and socially.
Oh, I agree with you 110%. He is made in America. He is a product of American capitalism. And look, I've been raised as a capitalist. I'm an American. And I strongly believed in our system of capitalism. I don't anymore. Not that I don't believe in capitalism per se. I don't believe in the American system of capitalism. And I won't go into that. That could be a whole other episode.
And we should be indeed, because we probably share a lot of similar ideas.
Oh yeah, well, again, I think that's a whole other episode. I believe in forms of capitalism, which many of which are practiced in Europe. But again, that's a whole other episode. However, what I want to say in answer to your thoughts and your question is that many Americans, I won't say all, but many Americans and most American businesses absolutely admired and still admire Donald Trump. To them, he is the epitome of what Americans should be. What do I mean? He's ruthless. He's cunning. He doesn't take anything from anybody. He speaks his mind. And if he cheats some contractors or stiffs some people out of their wages, you know what? That's pretty smart. If he doesn't pay his taxes for years or ever, again, that's pretty smart. They wish they could do that. And if he says that he's a good Christian, but yet he violates every important tenet of Christianity, that's okay too, because he says that he is against abortion and he believes that America is a Christian nation. So they love all of that. They are more than willing to forgive him of his sins. I'm interested to see what they think about the Trump as Jesus issue and taking umbrage and castigating and insulting the Pope publicly. I'm interested to see about that, what they do about that. But I want to throw something back at you, Jonathan. I've talked about this a lot. Why do you think that at least a third, and I'm going to go as far as to say almost 50% of the American voters, not all the public, but a third to 50% of the American voters, these are adults obviously, still support Donald Trump? Where is that coming from? They have access to all the information we do, whether or not they choose to seek it out. Why does Donald Trump, after all he's said and done, including now with Iran, the Pope, everything, why does he still have such a high rating with such a large percentage of the American public?
I think there's a couple of things. And when we talk about access to information, and they have theoretical access to that information, but I think we have to make a distinction about whether they choose to access that or not. And I'm not coming up with this research, but there's some interesting figures which suggest, who is it that is breaking away from Trump? Well, we've talked about the sort of podcast bros, etc. Well, it might be instructive to look at their demographics. Their demographics skew much younger, and therefore it is the sort of younger demographics, the under sort of 45s, who went over to the Trump camp and who were largely consuming, I would say, positive news, albeit manufactured news about Trump through the podcast community. It seems that actually the older demographics, the core you're talking about, who have not yet peeled away, theoretically they have access to the information we have, but they will never consume that information. They will never even be aware of that information, because what they're getting is their view of reality from Fox News, which paints a picture of reality that is totally at variance to the one we're seeing. They're still building this sort of normalized shell around Trump and demonizing the enemies. And all they have to do is to make the alternative to Trump sound scarier than Trump and manufacture this reality all around, blame every problem on someone else. And unfortunately, they live in a different world. They live in an entirely different manufactured informational world than the one we live in. But I think this is where it gets interesting, isn't it? If we see certain demographics peeling away, if we see certain ethnicities peeling away because they're starting to get information through their communities and other than online or Fox News sources, and they're starting to see the impact of, say, ICE in their communities, then that's kind of interesting. Trump built his popularity through pulling together a lot of people who ordinarily would not have voted for the Republican side. He brought together a lot of people who ordinarily would not have voted at all. So the way to undo Trump is not to convince all these people to see him in exactly the way we see him, but it's probably to fragment his audience, break them down into different demographics, different communities, and just start sort of making them aware that the alternative is not more scary or just as bad, to use the Russian, electoral framing or propaganda framing, but to say the alternative may not be ideal, but it's an awful lot healthier than what we have here, but tackle them community by community. What I'm reading, because we're going to get onto this in a second, is Peter Magyar seems to be a really interesting individual. Because he's built this electoral campaign not on myths, not on populist slogans, not on the demonization of minorities or Ukraine. He's done it through extraordinary, more traditional campaign of visiting every town and every village, listening to people's concerns, reflecting their concerns back. And all these things often don't have anything to do with big identity agendas, etc., or these manufactured crises. It's about addressing real, local, granular problems, but also must involve huge hard work. I read that he would have done 4 to 6 electoral manifestations or rallies a day in, day out, month in, month out. Extraordinary kind of graft, but it creates connection with the people. And it shows that actually traditional conservatism can beat populist hollow conservatism. It shows that this graft of traditional campaign can deliver a landslide when you are in touch with something authentic, and you make that empathetic connection with the voters. You can make some kind of change. I think there's a lesson here for Western democracy. There's a lesson here for the Democrats to learn as well, which is just move the debate onto things that people are actually talking about, move the debate onto the problems people have, and demonstrate factually how Trump is not delivering on these things, but making them worse, and maybe leave the identity stuff, behind, because those in a cult are really, they're not going to be persuaded if you attack the cult leader, but you have to come in at some other layer of reality that relates to their personal experience.
Well, you and I talked about this yesterday, and we've talked about it ad nauseum before, which is that at least in this country, and I think also to a degree in Europe, the Democrats, the liberals, if you will, don't talk about the topics and the issues that affect everyone. They tend to go for the fringe topics, the topics, the extreme left-wing progressive topics that affect people for sure and their families, but do not affect the vast majority of voters. And so they have lost the center. And I can't say this enough. The center is where people live, meaning they care about putting food on their table, putting a roof over their head, putting clothes on their children, educating their children, having a job, and getting a decent wage, and on and on and on. They're not necessarily that wound up about trans rights or what's going on in other countries or geopolitics or politics at all. They're concerned about day-to-day survival. And in my country, and I've said this a lot, I'll keep saying it as long as I draw a breath, the Democrats have lost that message. They used to be very, very, very good at that, going way back to at least FDR in the 30s. And they were the party of the people, the working class people. They understood what the average American wants and needs, and they produced, they passed laws and policies to help the average American. They've gotten away from that. Now they're looked at as the elites, people who walk around like this and look down at people who aren't as educated or aren't as wealthy as them. That's got to stop. The biggest thing, and I've said this a lot too, Jonathan, between now and even 20 years ago, 30 years ago for sure, is social media. Social media has poisoned the minds of many, many Americans. Donald Trump, as evil as he is, as great a huckster and a grifter and a salesman as he is, would not be who he is today if it weren't for social media. MAGA would not exist if it wasn't for social media. But it's here. It's not going away. The genie's not going back in the bottle. The Democrats, the opposition party, whatever you want to call them, has to learn how to get their message out on social media. They're terrible at that. Not to mention the fact they look like cowards. They're not able or willing to confront the Republicans at all. They just throw subpoenas out at them, wag their fingers and say, aren't you bad people? Sick of that. They've got to grow a couple, and they've got to develop a spine. on social media, in person, in town halls all across the United States, and get their message out and make the message about the center, not about who can use bathrooms in high schools and malls. And I'm not against gay rights. I'm a huge, huge supporter of gay, trans rights and all that. That's not the point. If you want to do away with MAGA, if you want to recapture America, make it what it used to be, and at least what our dream was, what the American experiments was all about, you got to come back to the center and give up all of these crazy extremist positions. I'm talking about the left now. The right, foregone conclusion. Fascism, no. But dictatorship. The Democrats have to come back to the center, and loudly. Until they do, Jonathan, we're doomed.
Well, let's tackle two issues quickly. One is this fight Trump's got with God going to backfire because he's now attacked the Pope? That seems to be extraordinarily myopic. And something that no one's done before. I mean, surely he doesn't think he can win an argument such as this. You had Eldred Colby apparently threatening the Vatican with hints at sort of, military or coercive force. That is quite remarkable. Again, does he realize that the Vatican doesn't have an army, and essentially
Colby
to invade
being
the
an
Vatican,
Undersecretary of Defense,
going to war with Italy, probably in the EU, if you want to take on the Vatican. But there's more to it than that, because there are a lot of people who will be potentially quite offended by this, who hold the Pope as a greater authority than anybody else on earth. That's their choice. I'm not going to comment on that as a choice. But this just seems to be a ridiculously pointless battle to get into, with no real benefit to be had there, either for Trump or anybody else. And then we'll briefly turn to Slovenia rather, but we'll pick that one up in more detail. But let's hit the Pope topic, and then we'll give a hint at tomorrow's episode, which will be about NATO and Slovenia.
Yeah, I mean, as many of you, if not all of you know, we discussed this yesterday. I posted a picture that Donald Trump made an AI-created image, and I'm really sorry I deleted it today for whatever reason. He made an AI-generated image of himself as Jesus Christ, including all of the robes and so forth, leaning over apparently a dying man in a bed, and he put his hand on his chest. Jonathan said it looks like Jeffrey Epstein, or possibly, who else did you say? A late night comedian there. I forget who, but in any event, it was
Jon Stewart. It had a passing resemblance to Jon Stewart.
And in this blasphemous, disgusting AI-created image, he had all sycophants around him. Of course, he had an ICE officer, he had an American soldier, he had jets going overhead, he even had the Statue of Liberty behind him and people praying and all of this. This is nauseating to have anyone.
Angels as well, I think.
Angels, can't forget the angels.
Soldier angels holding hands.
To have an American president doing this, Jonathan, there are no words for this. There really aren't. And then to pick a fight, to actually say pretty negative, insults, the adolescent insults that Trump is known for, hurling them at the Pope. One of them was, we can't have a Pope who's all for war, or who's for Iran having a nuclear weapon, which they never said, of course. It's just disgusting how the American electorate, how the American Christians, including the evangelicals and Christian nationalists, and can continue to support Trump after he posted that blasphemous image of himself as Jesus Christ is beyond me. However, Jonathan, keep this in mind. They've already said that they believe that Donald Trump is the anointed Messiah, appointed or anointed by God. They believe he is his messenger, his Messiah here on earth. They have prayer sessions in the Oval Office where they're putting hands on each other and praying to Trump as God's messenger and prophet here on earth. So I really don't think this is going to change their opinion.
It's not such a departure. And let's face it, I mean, him railing at the Pope as being soft on crime is interesting, unless, of course, somewhere in his mind, he's thinking, well, you've got this parable of the Good Samaritan, and you've got these, you've got the money changers in the temples. Yet whatever it says in the Bible, that stuff is not good. Leave the bankers alone. Leave, don't let the homeless and the other people, aliens, into your homes.
Think about this, Jonathan. Maybe this is a precursor to him invading the Vatican and taking over all of the Vatican, St. Peter's and so forth. Just think of all the gold and other treasures in there. I mean, he's all about gold. You know that. He's got a gold toilet. So this may be an invasion of the Vatican. I mean, he wants Greenland, for God's sake. Well,
he wants to build a huge golden arch with a giant golden eagle.
Absolutely.
The next step is
well, he could put the Vatican on top of this, as the Arch de Triomphe. Instead of defeating the Nazis, he could defeat the Vatican. I think this could be a plan.
The Arc de Triomphe, which in itself is grotesque, having seen the plans of that. The gold.
He's going to send in Delta Force to defeat the Swiss Guards, I understand.
Someone said, "Don't knock the Swiss Guard." We have a comment up there.
I love the Swiss Guards. Are you kidding?
Swiss Guards' combat readiness. No, I've had this argument with Swiss friends of mine before. They're like, well, there's a good reason why, Switzerland wasn't invaded by the Nazis. We're ringed by mountains. Like, yeah, bullshit. That's not the reason. It's because they needed somewhere to store their gold. So, frankly, the Swiss, sorry, offense, but really, no.
In any event.
Yeah, I mean, this is madness. Well, we'll park the sort of Trump lunacy. He's taken the image down. He's claimed he was just a simple doctor. Of course, coming from I would say an Irish Catholic family. I mean, that's not convincing in any sense, because we've seen these images before. We know exactly what the little, gold aura from your hands actually means, as well as the rest of what's depicted there.
How about Slovenia?
Let's quickly touch on Slovenia, because at
Not
most I thought we were talking about Slovakia.
My family comes from Slovakia. Yeah. Don't disparage them.
Well, they're already Kremlin aligned. So we're now talking about, we're now talking about, and I'm sure I know lots of lovely Slovakians. I don't think I do, but I've been there actually. I've even been there. It was before Czechia split from Slovakia, and I witnessed a huge fight between Czechs and Slovaks. So that was a premonition of what was to come. So we have Orban out, we have Hungary moving back into the bosom of, I would say, European security, whatever, the conservative values of the new government, etc. His initial phrases have been very positive vis-a-vis security, vis-a-vis being non-Russian aligned, moving away from dependence on Russia for resources and unblocking aid to Ukraine. So this seems lovely and normal, back to normality there. And then suddenly it's one in, one out on this revolving door. We have Slovenia, which I've always thought of as being very, not affluent, but a very, nice country, beautiful country, liberal people. Suddenly they seem to have taken a pro-Kremlin turn. What on earth is going on?
Well, you've got this asshole. Look at him. I mean, I'm sorry. Does he look like he was molded in the Kremlin? He looks like something that would come out of the Rocky Horror Picture Show as Rocky.
He needs a better suit. That suit is, I would describe it as ill-fitting.
Ill-fitting, yeah. Again, made in the Kremlin by Kremlin tailors, perhaps. But that's him. This is old Zora. Well, I'll post his little statement here. Slovenia's parliament speaker proposes a NATO exit referendum, signals possible Moscow visit. Slovenia's new parliament speaker, Zoran Stevanovic, says he plans to hold a referendum on leaving NATO, while also signaling openness to visiting Moscow and pursuing a more independent foreign policy. That means kissing up to Putin and distancing Slovenia from NATO. Although the article goes on to say that they're not going to distance themselves from the EU. Why? They love those euros. They like the money coming in, but they don't want to give anything back to Europe by supporting NATO and dissing themselves from the Kremlin. Disgusting.
Whether they go all the way or not, we'll certainly keep we'll keep our eyes on that. But there's lots of stuff to carry on this week. We've got the blockade that isn't a blockade, or the blockade of the blockade, which doesn't make an awful lot of sense. We have Trump already tackling last night by essentially the US blockade being seen to be entirely porous by letting a Iranian tanker through to get access to Iranian oil. It seems that this is a blockade in name only and is highly performative, but not actual. And yet Trump is still, I was going to say extorting. That probably is the right word. He's still, calling on European allies to send their ships in there, do this, do that. It is quite clear to do things that he's not prepared to do. Why is he not prepared to do them? Because there are people in the military who've basically told him that it will be a catastrophe. Those boats will be hit. You've got aircraft carriers, you've got other boats. They're going to be hit. There's people going to be injured and killed by Iranian speedboats, which we've already covered. And yet he's calling on NATO and Western allies to do what he's not prepared to do.
Jonathan, I'm waiting for the U.S. Navy to try to interdict a Chinese or an Indian vessel, Indian flagged vessel, or a vessel that is being escorted by China or whatever. We're going to get on this again tomorrow. I know we have to, and I've got some clips to play tomorrow. But China gets 90% of their oil from Iran. I think India gets about 70%. So I'm just waiting for if the U.S. Navy tries to interdict ships from one of those two countries, and we'll see what happens.
And I think this is a good point here. China is suffering from the blockade. China is probably the target of Trump's words, but he's not prepared to follow that with any actions. It's taco on a grand scale, and he's going to look increasingly ludicrous. We'll keep asking the question, who is noticing apart from his detractors? That's probably it for today. Yep, check out the links in this video. Check out the other videos on David's channel, my channel. I'm putting one up this evening. That's going to talk a little bit about, there it is, Silicon Curtain, the book. So watch out for the episode tonight.
Jonathan's got a book coming out, folks.
I've got a book. There we go. Book.
Support that.
So episode coming out tonight. All the details will be in there, where you can buy it, what it contains. It's a big episode / pitch / news episode. We're timing the PR launch for 9th of May, which is especially ironic, given that it's Victory Day, which looks like it now may be cancelled, and there's nothing to feel victorious about.
I hope it's not cancelled. I want to see some drone action in Moscow.
That'd be good, or even better, flamingo action. The side of the Kremlin erupting in a ball of fire behind the stands would be spectacular. But
great imagery.
We can wish for that. For today, though, that's everything.
Yeah, thank you, folks. Go No Delusion Zone at No Delusion Zone on YouTube, and protectingtherepublic.com, my Substack. Please go there and stay safe and stay sane.